It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
I can't stand people paying penalties. Penalties break my heart because not only are taxes bad, penalties are horrible. So we want to help you avoid a 50% penalty.
Yeah, so penalties are bad. When I think of 50%, that makes me uncomfortable because that's not just like a penalty. That's like, I want to take your kneecaps out from under you.
Well, and let's talk about this because I want to set it up. So here's the thing. This is what, when we're talking about, you need to make sure you take all of your distributions, because here's what you need to understand. Let's talk about what the IRS gets upset about. The first thing is if you miss a filing deadline, meaning that the tax return's due by April 15th, you overslept, missed the exam, and you didn't turn in your tax return on April 15th. There's potential that you could be charged up to 22.5% for a late filing penalty.
No, this has nothing to do with the actual payment itself. This part is just not getting the documents turned in on time.
Got to make sure if you're not going to turn it in, you better at least, at a minimum, file an extension.
Yep.
So don't miss the deadline. So the government takes it serious. That's why they put a 22.5% penalty, up to a 22.5% penalty. The next one is if you filed your tax return, but you said, guess what? Don't have the money. So you late payment, and you didn't pay your taxes when you want to. They're going to start charging you a 5% penalty up to 25% limit of the total tax. That's just penalty. It's horrible.
So I can pay both of these, right? So if I late file and I don't pay my taxes, I can pay up to 22.5% late filing and up to 25%.
So let's take that scenario.
payment.
Even if you did both of those things, those horrible activities, which we all agree, if you don't pay your taxes, uncle has a right to be mad at you. Our favorite taxing uncle has a right to be mad. But that isn't even take the cherry at the top on how bad things are. If you mess up your required distributions, your required minimum distributions for the government, the penalty is 50%.
So, Brian, when you say required minimum distribution, you're actually talking about two things. You're talking about folks who have qualified retirement accounts, 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, that reach age 70 and a half. The IRS says, hey, when you reach 70 and a half, we've given you this tax benefit for all these years, but you have to start pulling this money out. But it's not just those accounts. It's also if you're someone who has a mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, uncle, aunt that left you an IRA or a 401k or even a Roth IRA, you also have to start taking a required minimum distribution from those accounts that you inherited.
Which is crazy that this is, why would the government, because this is what bothers me so much, they put the biggest penalty of 50% for screwing up one of the more complex things. And if you need proof of how complex all this is, I want you to know the most controversial thing we did in pre-show planning was these next two slides, because Reby was like, that's horrible. Don't put that up there. But we just to prove our point, we want you to know how complex this can be. Bo, go ahead and unleash it.
So one thing you have to do to even figure out what your required minimum distribution is, you have to go look at what was the balance of all of my different qualified accounts at the end of last year. You have to then come find your age in the mortality table, and then you have to divide to figure out the math to figure out how much you have to distribute. But it gets worse. It's not just the same table depending on what kind of required distribution you're talking about. What we're showing on the screen right now is one table that shows if it's your asset.
This is required minimum distributions for your qualified accounts.
There's even a whole other table for required minimum distributions for inherited IRAs.
And they don't match.
And by the way, if you screw this up, and if you're someone who says, oh, okay, well, I know I got to Google this table, and grandma left me this account, so I'm just going to go do this, and you start drawing off of the wrong table, you are still on the hook for the penalty, the 50% penalty, if you didn't pull out the correct amount.
So make sure, like I said, the government is very serious about this. This is a bigger penalty than missing the tax filing deadline. This is a bigger penalty than not even paying your taxes on time. Pay attention to this stuff. So it's definitely something to be taken very serious.
It's just worth mentioning. We already mentioned earlier in the show. Remember, if you are someone who's trying to do a distribution strategy, a great way to think about approaching your required minimum distributions is to be like Savvy Granny, who used qualified charitable distributions where she was able to decrease your income. One important thing to note, though, is you cannot do QCDs for inherited IRAs.
That's true.
It's got to be on
Great
your
point.
assets. You can't do it for inherited IRAs.
Woo! Man. Minimum distributions.